The Tigers' offseason being as quiet as it has been, the team over here at Woodward Tigers has been talking about doing some different kind of content with 100 plus years of Tigers baseball behind us. So we figured we start with something a little more modern and our top five outfielders from 2010 to 2019.
I will say that I have more solid memories of the 2010 Tigers baseball season than a lot of other years of the last 10, 12 years because my now wife and I went to a lot of games that summer, but also it was the transition year when the Tigers kind of rebuilt on the fly, if you will, when out with Granderson, in with a player we'll be mentioning tonight, I think, along with Max Scherzer and some others. And yeah, it was just I was there for Brendan Bosch's first home run and Scott Sizemore's first home run, and the Tigers had this kind of this weird up and coming team. So it's a good place to go back and reminisce.
So without further ado, I'll let John start with his top five outfielders of 2010 to 2019. Take it away, John.
All right. So at my number 5 spot is a bit of a surprise for me. And that is going to be Rajay Davis. Played from the Tigers 2014 to 2015. Had back-to-back 1.6 WAR seasons, so was almost a 2 WAR player for each of those seasons, and was really solid. Stole some bases, played a good center field. He was replacement to Austin Jackson. Another good signing by Dave Dombrowski. So I was a little shocked that he got into my top 5, but he did have that really epic walk-off grand slam. That was a great moment. And yeah, he was really solid on a playoff team in 2014, and then fortunately 2015 didn't go so well. My number 4 spot is another surprising one for me because this player only played a year and a half for the Detroit Tigers, and that was Justin Upton. Now Upton got that big 6-year contract from Jordan Zimmerman. It was late in the 2016 offseason. And 2016, he had a pretty up and down year. I remember 2016 had a really slow first half. Really picked it up in the second half. But, man, 2017, I was looking at his numbers. He got traded by the Tigers, I believe, at the trade deadline, or it might have been the waiver deadline. I'm not sure.
The waiver deadline.
It was the waiver deadline? Yep. Okay. But he did have a 5.2 WAR before he got traded, that was really, really solid, and he did make the All-Star team that year. Number 3 is Torrey Hunter. Now, Justin Upton did have 6.8 WAR to Torrey Hunter, only had 3.5, but I feel like Torrey Hunter just played, an important role on some really, really good teams in 2013 and 2014, making the playoffs both seasons, was an All-Star in 2013, solid defender, and at the age of 37 and 38, was a really, really good addition to this team. He was hitting second in front of Miguel Cabrera. Number 2 spot is JD Martinez. I would say he's definitely the best hitter on this list. 13.3 WAR, played from the Tigers from 2014 to 2017, was traded at the 2017 deadline. We're not going to talk about that return. But had some really, really good seasons. 2015 was an all-star. 38 home runs, and unfortunately did deal with some injuries in 2016, which hurts me a little bit because you got to wonder if he doesn't get injured in 2016, maybe the Tigers make a wild card. But was really, really good. OPS was always around 900. Defensively, it wasn't the greatest, but I'm going to give him my number 2 spot. And then number 1 may come as a surprise. It was definitely a surprise for me when I was looking, these things up. Austin Jackson. Austin Jackson actually had a total of 20.2 WAR from 2010 to 2014, only played half of the 2014 season, and surprisingly never made an all-star team. But had some really, really good seasons. I would say 2012 was his best season, had an 856 OPS with 16 home runs. Did strike out a decent amount, but was always very reliable in center field, and was a very important piece to those Detroit Tigers teams. Finished second in Rookie of the Year voting in 2010, had 181 hits that year. So Austin Jackson would take my number 1 spot for my top 5 outfielders of the 2010s.
All right, that's good, John.
Thank you very much.
That was good with my top 5 outfielders because I think there's not much. There is slight deviation for them. So number 5 would be Quentin Berry. Now you're asking yourself, asking Rogelio, why'd you pick Quentin Berry?
Oh,
look, not because of his stats, but the reason why is Quentin Berry and Chris. I think you can and you could attest to this too. In 2012, when that team needed a spark, Quittenberry provided it. Singles everybody loved, the speed, and there was something about Quittenberry that summer that really kind of helped the Tigers a little bit. And so I know it sounds to me like it's career wise. I mean, he only was 1 year for 1 season, but that was a team that was on the World Series, and when the Tigers needed a spark, he kind of provided that. A guy was 258 hitter. It wasn't, again, not the stats are not going to favor him, no doubt. And I normally I wouldn't be. It sounds like I'm doing some sort of like utility man. Like there's a certain player in this town that everybody loves that we already know, but Quittenberry for 1 season for the Tigers, I thought just the way he played, and he was just a quick guy, slapped the ball around, and you don't see that. Those outfielder types, he's one of the last of the outfield types you'll see like that anymore because it's all power. It's all you got hit for average and a little bit, and you can't do this power. You can't do the speed and finesse defense thing anymore. He's definitely a 4th outfielder type. Number 4 would be Magdaleno Ordonez. End of his career, he only played 2 seasons between 2010 and 2011, but his 2010 season, 303 batting average, 474, 852 slash line with OPS plus of 129. And his career as a Tiger war-wise was 13.5, and that's in 7 seasons. And so for having that knee injury for the Tigers, taking a big risk, the way Maglio played, his last 2 seasons, mind you, yes, he wasn't what he was before that, but he still, again, for what he was able to do for his career here in Detroit, a tip of the cap to Maglio. We can't really forget what he did for the Tigers. For 3 would have to be, it's coming in as Torrey Hunter. And Torrey Hunter was a good free agent pickup. And he was a guy who, for his advanced age, for 2 seasons with the Tigers, puts a hit 304 in his first season with the Tigers. Solid defender. Even despite his advanced age a little bit, because I know the Angels, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they moved him to the corner spot because he was losing speed in center field, but still, nevertheless, played a good glove, and it was a free agent pickup that worked out for the Tigers. So for number 2, and that would be Austin Jackson. As John mentioned earlier, his production for the time he was here in Detroit was well worth the trade for Curtis Granderson, who was not going to sign here long term. So I think the Tigers did a really good job with getting the most out of Austin Jackson. And number 1, it's pretty simple to me, is JD Martinez. For what it's worth, for a waiver pickup, it's one of the best waiver pickups of all time. Mm-hmm. And the Tigers struck gold. And for once, the Tigers at this period of time too, you guys recall this, pick up a waiver wire, which we've been seeing right now recently under Scott Harris, where it's like every day is some guy going, who, what? Who is this guy? But with JD Martinez, there was some developments of his swing right before he left for Houston, before Houston dropped him. So, but yeah, JD's my number 1 outfielder of the 2010s to 2019s.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many options we can run through here, so I'm not going to take too long. I will throw an honorable mention out there. We'll throw 2. One honorable mention that I actually believe in is Yoenis Cespedes, who I thought was awesome in about 100 games. Yeah. And probably would have been, if they had kept him, he probably would have been fine, although things kind of went downhill later. But yeah, just he doesn't make the list because he wasn't here long enough. The other one,
and he also is not much of a farmer either. So
no. And this one is not serious, but I just saw and retweeted this about Ryan Rayburn. Ryan Rayburn, I retweeted. Somebody pointed out that Ryan Rayburn is like the biggest White Sox killer of all time. I'm like, what? I never noticed that. 5 I have is Nick Castellanos, who I was never a huge fan of, and he was obviously a pretty bad defender wherever they put him. But his offense really did take off once they moved him to the outfield. That was when he became like a full grown up, corner bat. And he produced for two and a half years. I think that that last year was not great with the Tigers till he heated up toward the deadline. But yeah, the options aren't great out there, and he was a pretty good hitter for him for the time he was in the outfield. My number 4 is Justin Upton, for the reasons you guys have mentioned before. He was incredibly streaky. You remember how bad he was that first 4 or 5 months, basically till the All-Star break of his first year, and then absolutely carried the team in 2016. He without him, they wouldn't have been still playing for a playoff spot in the final week of the season. He was bonkers in September. I think the number 3 for everybody so far has been Torrey Hunter, and that's mine too. And a lot of it, this is very feelings ball, but it was, like you guys pointed out, the Tigers were in search of a corner outfielder. That was like the missing piece. They had tried Brennan Bosch for 3 years. They had Rayburn out there. They had Dirks. They had Delman Young. And they needed somebody who could come in there and just play in the corner every day. And that's what Torrey Hunter did. And in the meantime, he also brought leadership that, I mean, at that time, the team, Miggy was the big veteran on the team. They had V-Mart, but it was they needed somebody, I think, to had been there and been through all the battles and stuff. And Torrey Hunter provided that for him, and he was good for the 2013 Tigers. Probably the best Tigers team of my adult lifetime, at least. Probably right up there with 1984 as the best Tigers teams in my entire lifetime. My number 2 is Austin Jackson, for the reasons you guys mentioned. He was a really well-rounded player. He was like a 4-tool player. The power never really showed up to a great extent, but he was just a kind of strange throwback line drive hitter who didn't, was either a strikeout or really hard contact for a line drive single. And then he played that elite defense where he just, you remember that people would talk about him. He never dove. He just, Jackson never dives. It's because he didn't need to. My number 1, like Raj, is JD Martinez. And again, yeah, he was not much of a defender. He wasn't bad the first couple of years. He was passable. But he was just such a powerful impact bat, like just a prototypical right fielder, the guy who's going to hit for a ton of power, hit for a ton of average. And he hit some iconic home runs too. I was at the game where he came back, the Chris Sale home run where he won the game for him, basically coming off the
Great
bench.
moment.
I just think his level of production was so impressive that I had to make him number 1.
What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. Going over all those names and pulling out some good memories. It's when you look at the list itself, once you get past JD Martinez, offensively, you don't see a lot of big producers. I mean, except Upton for short stretches. So it shows you how much Miguel Cabrera pushed that team to excellence in 11, 12, and 13. Just having that massive presence made up for some guys who, were slightly better than middle of the pack. Where I have these guys, obviously I'm not going to bring any new names into this, but as we were talking, I had Castellanos 5th. He definitely started to mature as he became an outfielder. That might be a coincidence, hitting wise. I had Hunter 4th for all the reasons. He was a good signing. I mean, he was, the kind of guy who I think definitely had a competitive streak to him and was helpful for those clubs. Upton, no question. The last 2 months of his first season, he was on fire. You were really anticipating his at-bats night after night. I mean, you could really count on, he was hitting home runs in big spots too. And I hate to say there's a clutch gene because there's not, but for whatever reason, he had a clutch streak of 2 months where if he was up in a big spot, you knew something good was going to happen. And that was very fun. Austin Jackson, number 2, the great catch. And then JD Martinez, one of my favorite Tigers of my lifetime. I love the guy. Great signing. He's the reason why you should always bring in straight talents when you have roster spots. Take chances. Worked out so well for him. You couldn't, find a better guy off the street than JD Martinez was for those 3 or 4 years. He had a few streaks where he struck out a lot, but I was always loved the study that he put into it. They always showed him making his notes. He was so religious about it. He was an easy guy to root for, and I certainly miss him. I know we all do.
If you have any suggestions for your top 5 outfielders of 2010 and you think I'm crazy for Quentin Berry, that's fine. Just leave us a comment section. Let us know what you think and give us your top 5 from 2010 to 2019 because I guarantee you somebody's going to put Don Kelly because he did play some games in the outfield. So like Quentin Berry experience may not be too far-fetched. So just like and subscribe to our channel. And thank you for watching. And there will be new episodes every Thursday throughout the season as baseball is shortly underway.